Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. We're going to give everyone a few minutes here to settle in for our live broadcast here at Emerald Bay State Park. Thank you all so much for joining us today. I see so many of you on the call here. So happy to have all of you with us. We have an exciting program in store for you today. Going to give it just a few moments and we'll be getting started. At the end of this program, we're going to have a Q&A session. So if you have any questions along the way, as we are exploring underwater in Emerald Bay State Park, you can leave them in the chat and we will be answering questions towards the end of the program. All right, hello, welcome everybody. Jeremy, you want to give them a wave, say hello?
Hello everybody, welcome to Emerald Bay State Park in Lake Tahoe. My name is Jeremy Lynn, State Park Interpreter, and I'm so excited to welcome you here underwater. We're about 35 feet down right now. You can see the beautiful waters of Emerald Bay all around here. Lake Tahoe, famous for the blue water, the clarity. I'd like to introduce you to some of our people over here. Just above me is Ranger Taylor Jackson, demonstrating a technique that we call photogrammetry in a little bit. Also with us is Erica Delamar, State Park Interpreter on camera.
Hi guys, it's good to see you again. Thanks for coming.
All right, let's talk a little bit about some of the water temperature and some of our safety equipment here. You'll notice we're all wearing pretty thick wetsuits. It's pretty cold down here. In fact, the temperature is 64 degrees right now down here. We have these 7-6 wetsuits to keep us nice and warm. It's important that we stay very safe while we're down here. And in fact, we've got certain safety equipment. I've got a pair of scissors down here, another cutting device. This is called a surface marker buoy. If something does go awry, we deploy this thing, we can signal up at the top that one of us needs some help. So before you go out into Lake Tahoe, make sure you have all the safety equipment all ready to go to make sure you have an enjoyable and safe time when you visit Lake Tahoe. Let's send it back up to Kaytlen while we get ready to do our photogrammetry demonstration. Kaytlen?
Awesome, thank you, Jeremy. The water looks so clear and cold down there, so I am happy you guys have your protective gear on. So yes, as Jeremy said, my name is Kaytlen Jackson and I'm an interpreter here at Emerald Bay State Park. Let's take a moment to just look around what we're seeing topside here. You can see the beautiful waters of the bay. It's a nice 65, 70 degrees out today, a little bit of wind. You can see beautiful Thanet Island, which is the only island in Lake Tahoe. You can also see Maggie's Peak up here behind me as well. So these incredible granite peaks that surround Emerald Bay State Park. And Emerald Bay is located on the southwest shore of Lake Tahoe. And let's talk just a little bit about the lake itself, because it's really special for a few different reasons. Number one, Lake Tahoe is the largest alpine lake in all of North America. So it is the largest lake that's above 6,000 feet in elevation in all of North America. Another reason Lake Tahoe is so special is because of its clarity. So at some points you can see up to 100 feet into the water of Lake Tahoe. And the reason for that clarity is a few different reasons. So first of all, 40% of the water that enters this lake every year falls directly onto the surface as rain and as snow. So it bypasses all the creeks and streams that would carry along rocks, dirt, and other organic material that might muck up the clarity of the water. We also have some really important wetlands that act as filters for that dirt and other organic material. It captures all of that sediment before the water enters the lake, adding to the clarity as well. So every year, 3 million people visit Lake Tahoe, and the vast majority of them are going to beeline straight to Emerald Bay in order to marvel at its beauty. It is really a spectacular place to visit, one of the most photographed places in the entire world. And people have been here marveling at the beauty of Lake Tahoe for long before it became a state park. And the original marvelers or inhabitants of this land are the Washoe people. So the Washoe people consider Lake Tahoe to be the center of their world, both geographically and spiritually. And the word Tahoe even comes from the Washoe word for this place, which is Da'au-aga, which translates to edge of the lake. So there's a little bit of Washoe language for you guys. So as you can see, the divers are behind me here in the water, and we are going to be diving on the Maritime Heritage Underwater Trail today. That's where interpreter Jeremy is in the water. And it's pretty incredible. We have an underwater interpretive trail complete with panels that you can read about the different artifacts that are down there underwater. And this is a really important cultural resource for state parks to protect and preserve for all of us to enjoy. And the really cool thing about it is you don't have to be a scuba diver in order to visit the Maritime Heritage Trail. There are several sites where you can access them by snorkeling as well on the surface. So you don't have to have that technical scuba diving gear to enjoy these underwater artifacts. All right, so as Jeremy said, we're going to be taking you through the process of photogrammetry today. What is photogrammetry?
Okay, it is down here. Behind me, you'll see a wooden fishing boat from the 1900s. And this was sunk on purpose, most likely, in about 1930 or so. In this area, they were building wooden fishing boats here in this Lake Tahoe region. Imagine you visit Lake Tahoe, you see all these wooden fishing boats going around fishing. Perhaps they pull out a 40-inch Lahontan cutthroat trout. That was one of the ways people were getting food back in the early 1900s, was the fishing industry out here. So just behind me, we've got about a 15-foot long fishing boat. And you'll notice that it's about 15 foot long, the hull's about 4 feet wide. And in the center, if the camera can kind of focus on the center, it's got a built-in live well. So as the fishermen were pulling fish on board or having bait, they would keep them fresh and live inside this live well here. Now you'll see just behind me, Ranger Taylor Jackson taking some data on this fishing boat. As California State Parks staff, our mandate is to preserve our submerged cultural resources and be stewards for artifacts and sunken objects just like this. Photogrammetry is one of the ways we're able to document the condition of these submerged artifacts and objects to see how they change over time, assess the condition that they're in. Taylor is swimming, kicking over the boat, taking photographs. We've got a time lapse that is set to about 2 seconds. And he's essentially painting the boat with photographs. He's going back and forth, and he's covering all sides. He's covering the top of the boat. He's covering as much as he can from all different angles. And by getting all those different angles, we refer to that as a parallax, all the different angles. Once we get all this data, we're going to plug that into a computer model and generate a 3D model that you might have seen on screen already.
Take a look. Let's go ahead and take a look at that 3D model now. So through photogrammetry, as you saw Ranger Taylor doing down underwater, he's taking photos of this vessel, and we will input those photos into a computer software program that turns it into a 3D model, like the one we are looking at on the screen now. So the boat that is underwater with Jeremy today is not the same boat that you're seeing on this screen, but it is from the exact same era. So it was built in the 1940s or 1950s, and it's the exact same style of recreational fishing boat. So you can see the live well there in the middle. You can see the thwarts, which are those beams running side to side. They serve as places for someone to sit, as well as keeping the boat structurally sound. So photogrammetry is different from just taking measurements and a drawing of an object, in that it really allows for an exact 3D replica of not only the object itself, but also the object's situation. So you can see this wooden fishing boat that we're looking at here in the model is kind of tilted to its side on the bottom of Emerald Bay. So this photogrammetry allows us to get the exact placement of the boat in the bottom of the lake, and that's going to help archaeologists to assess the way that the boat may or may not be deteriorating over time. So a really cool way of monitoring these vessels and being able to continue telling those stories and protecting these resources into the future. Just a note as well, I want to talk just a moment about the history of these boats and how they came to be sunk at the bottom of Emerald Bay. So in 1881, there was a resort that was built here in Emerald Bay called the Emerald Bay Resort. And this resort was a family-style resort. There was a hotel you could stay in, there were cottages, and there were also tent pads. And here we see a photo of the Emerald Bay Resort. And there were lots of different recreational opportunities for folks who were staying there. You could go hiking, you could go fishing, you could go horseback riding, but undoubtedly these watercraft, these small recreational watercraft, were a fine way to spend an afternoon if you were staying at the Emerald Bay Resort. You can see here in this photo is a barge. So this was the main form of transportation around Lake Tahoe for a long time. It was much easier to get to and from the different shores of the lake by water rather than by road. So you can see here a barge that would be used to transport cars, as you can see, as well as goods and other materials that were needed, food supplies, things like that. So moving forward into the 1950s is when the state of California acquired this land where the Emerald Bay Resort sat, and they decided to turn it into a state park in 1953. It was at that time that all of the boats on the underwater Maritime Heritage Trail were purposely scuttled, which means sunk, mostly because it was easier to just sink these boats than it was to try to pull them out of the bay and transport them elsewhere. So these boats were purposely sunk to the bottom of Emerald Bay at that time, and Boat Camp, which is a campground here on the north shore of Emerald Bay, was created. Then for several decades, these boats sat undisturbed in the bottom of Emerald Bay until coming into the 1990s, we started discovering them, and the Maritime Heritage Underwater Trail was first announced as a place we could recreate in 1998. So let's go back down to Jeremy and Ranger Taylor and check out more of this photogrammetry work we're doing.
All right, everyone. So Taylor's doing a great job of painting this boat in this 3D model that we are collecting data for right now. This is going to be available to you. We're going to build a 3D model using software, and we're going to be posting this out on the port's website and the Emerald Bay and the California State Park Tahoe websites. So you can access a 3D image that you can manipulate and explore this boat based on the data that Taylor is taking right now. So cool. We suspect that this boat is probably built in the 1930s and 40s because it's completely wooden. As the 1940s and 50s started to approach, they were using other composite materials like metal. So we're pretty sure this is kind of the early 1900s vessel. Wonderful. I also want to note that sometimes you can get immaculate clarity out here. Sometimes you can see 70 feet out into the water because of the clear Lake Tahoe waters. So it's very important for us to be conscious of how we can contribute to the health of Lake Tahoe. And one of those ways is to reduce the amount of aquatic invasive species. We could actually use your help in doing that. We have certain aquatic invasive species, kind of like the Eurasian milfoil, the curly leaf pondweed, and Asian clams that have a propensity to spread around the lake. So whenever you take your watercraft, like this boat, and hopefully your boat doesn't turn into this one right over here, make sure when you take it out of the lake or any body of water, you're cleaning it, you're draining it, and you're drying it before you're able to put it into a different body of water to prevent the spread of the aquatic invasive species. And that'll help to keep your lake, Lake Tahoe, in a beautiful blue and clear recreation spot for yourself.
Awesome. Thank you, Jeremy. Hey, I have a couple of questions here in the chat. Jeremy, can you answer for us, what is the small little red flag in the water?
That is the universal dive flag. That red flag with the stripe through it, that is indicating that there are divers in the water. And the message there is for if you're in a boat, to give that place some distance, because potentially some of the divers underwater could surface. And we want to minimize the amount of times that that diver might be in danger from a boat going by overhead when the diver is surfacing. So that dive flag there is something to be conscious of when you're out on the water. And most people really want to talk to the divers to see what's going on, see what they're doing, kind of like us mapping this beautiful submerged object. But take a moment, make sure that the divers are able to get up and out of the water safely before you approach them to ask about the project that they're doing.
Awesome. Thank you, Jeremy. I have another question here. It says, what is that mountain called? I believe you're referring to this mountain right here, which is Maggie's Peak. Maggie's Peak, a beautiful granite peak sitting on the west side of Emerald Bay State Park. Another question for you, Jeremy, is how long can you stay underwater with your scuba diving tanks?
That is a wonderful question. Now, there's a lot of factors to take into account when planning your dive. As part of the dive team, we have to submit pretty detailed dive plans with a specific objective. So we typically don't go down in the water just to kind of explore around and do things. We have a really specific plan that says we're going to go to a depth of, say, 50 feet. We're going to stay at 50 feet for 20 minutes. We're going to explore, maybe take some transects, maybe try to find, do a survey of plants to see if there's any invasive aquatic species as part of the goal. We always want a goal when we're diving. And then we're going to surface after 20 minutes, and we're going to do a safety stop at about 15 feet. So there's always a specific plan associated with that. But to answer your question, you can typically stay down for as long as you can have oxygen, air, and that your body's safe with all your equipment down there. So if we're about 35 feet deep right now, I'm looking up and I can see the sunlight and I can see the bubbles floating up to the top. We're at a pretty good depth here of 35 feet. Today, based on the tank of gas that I have, and we want to be conscious of diving at a high altitude, we're actually in the middle of a high altitude diving training course right now. So we're doing all these calculations that are a little bit different than the seafloor. So if we stay here about 35 feet and I have about 3,000 PSI in the tank over here, I could probably stay down safely here for maybe about 45 minutes or so before I'd want to just to be sure, to be safe, to go back to the surface and kind of reassess the situations. Temperatures change. You get different thermal climbs moving through. So sometimes you can have this unexpected cold wave kind of hit you. Any scuba divers out there on this call, you might remember that, is you're going down and automatically hit this layer of cold water and you're like, boom. Feels like you just went into the Arctic ice shelf or something like that. So there's always changing conditions. So we have our dive plans to make sure that we're operating safely within those diving parameters. but probably be down here at 35 feet, about 45 minutes safely before we want to come back up. Great question.
Fantastic. Thank you, Jeremy. I am, like I said at the beginning of the program, I am happy you have your wetsuit on to protect you from the cold. As you can see, I have this PFD or personal flotation device on up here at the pier where I'm delivering this program from as well. So like Jeremy said, this water is extremely cold, and it's really important to be able to protect yourself in the event that you do fall into this water. So number one thing you can do is remain calm if you fall into cold water. Well, number one thing you can do is always have your PFD on. Number two thing you can do is remain calm. The calmer you can stay, taking those big deep breaths, the safer you're going to be in this cold water. Jeremy, one more question for you. What are the white pieces under the boat? Did we talk about that?
Oh, yes. Thank you for bringing that up. Awesome. You'll see these black and white kind of patterned implements right here on the boat. So this one over here is called a photo bar. So this is for us to kind of help calibrate our photos, create an anchor for when we're taking data on this boat. So this photo bar here, and this is called a coded target here. So when we're stitching together all of our data and our photographs, these are anchor points to calibrate that data, so everything kind of has a baseline to be anchored to when we're creating our 3D rendering. These are pretty important for us to have here. Nice, and you're getting a nice close-up look at that boat there. Awesome. Erica with that stellar camera work. Nice. Oh. So you'll see that there's some structural things we can talk about on this boat here. It's got these ribs to kind of help it hold its structure. It had two thwarts in here, and thwarts are structural, but also seats that you can sit on. And there are several other vessels like this down here in Emerald Bay that you can explore yourself once you become a scuba diver and join us down here on the beautiful blue waters of Lake Tahoe. All right, anyone out there do some fishing? Anyone out there fish connoisseurs?
Yes, Jeremy. I'm getting a lot of questions about what fish or wildlife you are seeing down there underwater.
Wonderful questions. Yep. We haven't seen any fish at this particular dive, probably because there's us around kind of causing some disturbance. But just the other day, we dove down and we saw a beautiful family of Tahoe suckers. They're called Tahoe suckers, kind of a funny name, but they're native fish to Tahoe. And we saw them in this nice little crack over here, and their little heads were poking up, and they have this broad mouth. Beautiful. I want you to guess, if you can, in the chat, what other fish you might be able to see here in Lake Tahoe. Go ahead and type that in. Let us know what you think. So examples of some of the other fish that we might see here, we've got some brown trout. Those are non-native. We've got the mountain whitefish. That's a native fish, beautiful kind of whitish fish. Gets maybe up to a foot long. You'll see those kind of, they move in groups. We also have a really neat fish. It's called the Paiute sculpin. The Paiute sculpin. And they're really well camouflaged. They've got all these cool little spines. They look very similar to the color of the sediment that we have here. Oh, I'm stirring it up. They look very similar to this kind of pattern here. They have spines, and they're able to tuck in the rocks. And as they tuck in the rocks, they completely camouflage in. They're really hard to see. So the Paiute sculpin, definitely look that one up. And in that chat, I bet some of you have guessed maybe some rainbow trout. We have that here. We have the kokanee salmon that swim around. And a lot of these are non-native fish that were brought here to be farmed and to eat for consumption. And then they started to take over and have their own sustaining populations in Lake Tahoe. So we have a mixture of native and non-native fish, but oftentimes the native fish are the ones we see in big numbers, And those are typically brought here because they get really big. In the beginning, I mentioned the Lahontan cutthroat trout. That was an important fish species for the indigenous people in this area, still is, or the people in this indigenous area are still all around here. And so the Lahontan cutthroat trout was massive, 40 inches, sometimes, 60 pounds, big fish. And unfortunately, that one was mostly fished out. There's a lot of efforts to reintroduce the Lahontan cutthroat trout to this lake and also other lakes in this area. No sharks in here. At least I haven't seen a shark. I haven't seen maybe Tahoe Tessie. Anyone seen Tahoe Tessie? Some of
Yeah, we are getting lots of questions about if you've ever seen a shark in Lake Tahoe. So thank you for clearing that up for us, Jeremy. A lot of people said trout, salmon, bass, whitefish, all of these types of fish are found in Lake Tahoe. There have even been goldfish and catfish introduced into Lake Tahoe at some point. So Lake Tahoe, although the most beautiful part of it is the clarity and the geology of the lake, the formations of rock underneath the water that you can look at, there are fish and other wildlife for you to see under there. So awesome. How did the boat sink? Yeah, so the boats were purposely scuttled or sunk in the 1950s after they had outlived their use as recreational watercraft in Emerald Bay. Any crocodiles? Definitely not. Is it hard to swim with all your gear on, Jeremy? Do you find that hard to do?
Yeah, great question. All this stuff is super heavy. Luckily, when we're floating around here, it's not as bad, but you can definitely feel the weight here, but it's important to have all the safety stuff. Let's see if I can do a little trick up here. Kick. So we're pretty agile. We're here under the water, even though all this weight is quite a lot. Now, one of the big challenges that we experience all the time is you put on all your gear, you hop into the water, and then you have to pee. If you pee in your wetsuit, you're gonna have a bad time. Actually, it's not that bad. You kind of just drain it out. But if you poop in your wetsuit, you're definitely gonna have a bad time. I got Erica with that one.
Thank you for that messaging, Jeremy. Important to know.
We gotta keep it real here. Yeah.
Fantastic.
There's specialized tools for everything. So even these gloves have this lining in it that keep my hands warm. Here's my dive computer over here. Check this out. You can even kind of see what temperature it is. Right now it's 64.6 degrees Fahrenheit. I got 95% battery left. That's pretty important. We want to make sure that's good. Depth of 36 feet. And then you can see how much oxygen I have left. So this is attached to a transmitter on my tank telling me how much oxygen I have. So I'm a mouth breather, so I tend to use up a little more oxygen than other people. But I have 1,224 pounds of air left in my tank over here. And that should be good. And as a policy, once our air gets down to 500 feet, we want to be surfacing as a safety precaution to make sure we're not running out of any air while we're all the way down here. So we're constantly taking a look at our computer and our gauges to be sure we're within safe diving limits. So definitely keep that in mind if you're planning to take up some scuba diving.
Last question from the viewers about your gear. What is that white board we are seeing at your waist?
So you'll notice we have communications going. We're able to talk to you guys because we're hardwired in. We have these HDMI cables going out up to the surface. Here's our line tenders. Actually, let's give a shout out to our line tenders over here. Woo, woo. They're helping us make this possible. So this is our hardwired connection. However, if you do not have a hardwired connection, You might want to bring something like this to be able to communicate with your dive buddies. I got my handy pencil so I can write something very important. I'm going to write Erica a message that's very important right now. You might want to XYZ, Erica.
I don't have a zipper. This is a wet. Well, I guess I do have a zipper in my wetsuit, but it's on my back.
So we do use these for important things also. We might want to say something like, hey, you know, it's looking like my oxygen is low, or I'm experiencing some kind of issue, or hey, I'm cold, or would you like to go explore around that rock over there to see if there's any wildlife? There's important things that we can communicate that we use these boards for when we don't have our communication systems here. So this is one example of one of the ways we can get creative while you're underwater. We also kind of have different hand signals also. For instance, when we do this, that means it's all right, I'm all good. We got the shaka over here. Shaka means everything's groovy, baby. We go like this, and when we're at the surface, I mean, hey, let's go down. It's time to go down. This doesn't mean like you're having a bad time or like thumbs down. It means, hey, it's time to dive. And then alternatively, when you do the thumbs up, that means you want to go to the surface. Sometimes you see something really cool and you want to go, oh man, I want to do the thumbs up. But then you're telling everyone that you want to go up to the surface. So that's what we're doing, the okay or the shaka, baby. Good stuff.
Awesome, Jeremy. Thank you for sharing all of that. So cool to see how it all works when we are underwater assessing our archaeological artifacts in Emerald Bay. It looks like you guys are having a lot of fun there, and I'm glad to see it. Do you have any other final messages that you would like to share with our audience before you head back to the surface?
All right, yeah, so final messages here. We want to emphasize safety. We want you to recreate responsibly. We want you to plan your trip out. If you're going to come scuba dive or do these water sports, make sure you have life jackets when you're around the water. Oftentimes, if you fall into the cold water from a boat, make sure you have that life jacket to keep you afloat. And remember that the cold water submersion can cause your body to react. You'll kind of choke up real quick, and your body has a strong reaction to that cold water. Try to keep on breathing, take a deep breath, lie down on your back on the life jacket, make sure you're floating to the top, and stay calm. You can learn more about all the boating and life jackets and safety in boatcalifornia.com, just to make sure you're ready and you're safe while you're recreating here in Lake Tahoe. We're so excited that we were able to do some photogrammetry of this boat with you guys. We're going to send out a link to the 3D modeling on our websites and our social media. So stay tuned for that. We're literally taking the data that Taylor took today, putting that in our software program and creating a cool model for you to be able to manipulate, to really explore that. And we'll have a little bit of the historical significance of that as well. So we're so thrilled that you guys were joining us. Pass it over to Erica real quick.
Yeah. I want to make sure that up on top side you can hear me. Brandon, hopefully you've got my volume up just a little bit. I want to say hello and thank you guys so much for joining us. I think one of the ending notes that I wanted to share was that yesterday, Jeremy and Taylor and I, we were down here scoping out the dive site, getting ready to have you all down here into our big blue backyard. And unfortunately, we spotted a whole lot of trash in this beautiful lake. So when you're going out to your favorite lake or river or even the coastline to the ocean, you gotta make sure that your stuff is not gonna blow away and blow into the water. Here in Emerald Cove, there's a lot of wind in the morning and the afternoon, and we found so much stuff down here on the lake floor. Now, of course, it's really important that we are good stewards of our lake and our state parks and even our marine protected areas along the shoreline, right? So one of the ways you can do that is making sure that when you come to a beautiful place like this, a state park or a lake, make sure you pack it in and pack it out. You don't want any of your trash to end up down on the lake bottom or out in our beautiful big blue ocean. since that was part of our experience as we've been preparing to invite you all down for this special live dive.
Yeah. Stay in tune with us. Keep an eye out for other live dives in the future. We're going to be planning other stuff and really exciting other accessible spots, exploring our waterways, exploring our lakes, exploring our oceans. We're so thrilled that you joined us. Thank you guys so much.
Thanks for tuning in, everyone. We'll see you next time.
Thank you guys for that messaging. Erica, thank you. You know, it's important to remember that state parks belong to all of us. You know, the dive team is down there doing really important work, surveying and protecting these artifacts, but it is up to every single one of us to recreate responsibly, you know, pack it in, pack it out, as Erica said, and keep these places beautiful for future generations. So thank you guys so much for joining us today. As Jeremy said, keep a lookout for this 3D model that we were creating underwater right now for you guys to see. Follow #PortsFan for future live streams. And just thank you all so much for joining us today here at Emerald Bay State Park. Thank you guys.